What's up, bodyweight warriors, and welcome back to another video. Today I want to talk to you about a common issue, and that could be from people who are sat working all day, people who are training, or just in general. You get a sore neck and you want to fix that issue. It can be quite irritating. Now, there is already quite a few videos on YouTube covering this, but a lot of them just seem to revolve around, okay, we need to stretch out the traps, we need to do this, whereas it's not always the case, and it's not always the reason for the issue. So today I want to present to you 3 ideas which I think actually could potentially help you out dramatically with this sort of like neck tightness feeling, potentially pain, particularly those headaches, that sort of thing. So without further ado, let's jump into this one. Right, so kicking things off, number 1, we're not going to talk about soft tissue release, releasing knots, all of this sort of stuff, because it's more of a temporary fix than something that's permanent. When we do soft tissue work, such as foam rolling, such as lacrosse balls, we get a temporary reduction in pain tolerance. Because we're doing something that hurts, i.e. the soft tissue work, it makes our perception of the pain beforehand less, and therefore it feels like it helps. It doesn't actually do anything in terms of changing the structure of the tissue in long term. Again, this is something that I covered in a literature review of foam rolling. That being said, it doesn't mean that soft tissue work isn't useful, because that neuromodulation of pain is quite a useful thing, and we're going to touch on that in point number 2. But something that I think people should be looking at as a primary focus is not necessarily the soft tissue work, not necessarily the stretching, but actually point number 1, which is strengthening the correct areas. Oftentimes, upper traps are a little bit demonized. People say that, oh, your traps are tight, this is causing the shoulders to get up and all these sort of things. And yes, in some cases, the traps can be an issue, but a lot of times they're potentially not the issue. Actually, they can often just be weak or overused due to other weaknesses. This is very much akin to the tightness that some people experience with their hamstrings or their forward fold flexibility. Sometimes that tightness is actually a protective mechanism. It's a manifestation of weakness in that area. And a lot of the times, people can be weak in their traps. Especially if you do absolutely no training at all, then doing some trap work, strengthening your trapezius is actually a fantastic option. Can dramatically help this experiencing of pain. And again, this has been pretty well detailed in some literature that doing strength training in problem areas that cause pain actually make those areas not painful anymore. Needless to say that this isn't always the case. Sometimes we need to consider that other areas may be weak, and this may be causing the upper traps to do more work than they need to do. For instance, it's been shown that weakness in the rotator cuff can often manifest in trap tightness. Oftentimes when people injure a rotator cuff, certainly I've experienced this one a couple of times, that you find that that side will get, that feeling of tight, that feeling of overuse in the upper trap. That upper trap is doing more stabilization work than it should be doing for the shoulder because it's not strong enough by itself. Therefore, if we spend some time strengthening our rotator cuff, strengthening our scapula as well, so this involves training things like the lower traps, then we can begin to take off some of the strain and the stress that's being placed on the upper traps for this related weakness. Now, this can be done through various ways. Most basic external rotation exercises are gonna help with the rotator cuff. The trap 3 raise is also a fantastic drill to focus on strengthening up the lower traps and take a little bit of that load off the upper traps. And also, my personal favorite, handstands could be argued as a good method for strengthening the traps, especially in that overhead position. So that's really number 1. It's not always about stretching out the traps, not always about doing soft tissue work. Sometimes they're just weak or the surrounding structures are weak. And by fixing those, we can take off that strain and that perception of pain. That for me should be the first protocol at looking at before we really jump into the other stuff. Option number 2, I want to share with you a fun distraction kind of decompression drill. Now, this particular drill, I can't say that it actually does anything in particular. It's going to give you a rough stretch on a lot of the muscles associated in the neck, but ultimately it feels nice. And sometimes exercises or drills that feel good are good. And they don't need any more explanation than that. Much the same as soft tissue work doesn't actually do much, but it feels good and it has that benefit. I like to do this one on a door, looping a band, a moderately heavy band, something that's going to be able to support your head around the door handle, taking a couple of steps back, lying down on the ground, looping that band around the base of your skull, behind the ears, and then just relaxing. The band will apply some light traction, pulling the head away from the body, and it also just gives a chance for that musculature in the neck to relax. If I've got a particular amount of tension sort of stored up in the traps, I quite like to do this one just as a way of relaxing, maybe before I go to bed or just in the evening. As I said, it feels good. Sit here for a couple of minutes, breathing and just relaxing into this position. Point number 3, let's talk about soft tissue work. As I said, I've already said that I'm not a massive fan of soft tissue work, but more in the sense of how it's often communicated, because clearly there are some benefits to doing soft tissue work. As I said beforehand with that prior example, if it feels good, it's gonna have some benefit to you. And certainly that neuromodulation of pain is a valuable factor. I just wanted to be clear in presenting the fact that it doesn't break down knots, or it doesn't do a lot of the things that people claim that it does. But as it feels good and it does have some benefit in that temporary pain reduction, we may as well cover a couple of options for soft tissue work that I personally like. My personal preference is to use the edge of a doorway or the edge of a wall to particularly set this one up. I like to do it with a lacrosse ball, tennis ball, some spherical hard-ish object, sit that into the wall, lean into it, place it on the traps, and then just try to relax a little bit. We can move around here, pausing on points that are particularly uncomfortable, so to say. But again, this shouldn't be like severe pain. We gotta be careful putting too much load through this particular area, because our nerves innervate from the base of our skull and they come out through this area. So we don't wanna have like any nerve compression or anything else going on that could be potentially detrimental. Another option that I'm a fan of is to lie on the back. I'm gonna place the lacrosse ball again on the upper traps, but the direction of the force is gonna be slightly different this time. And then from here, I like to move the arm through flexion. So moving that from your side into that overhead position, trying to touch the thumb down to the floor, and then coming back to that starting position. We can do this for reps. We can hold it in certain positions. We can try going wider, going narrower, really just generally moving the arm about with that lacrosse ball, focusing on the upper traps. Can generally feel good and have a reasonable level of relief. Finally, I want to talk about something that isn't the upper traps, but it is potentially related. And this is a common area that I do see people holding tension or having that discomfort, and that is the scalenes. Now, the scalenes are actually 3 paired muscles that attach to the first and second rib, and they're present on the lateral aspects of the neck. They do contribute to obviously movement of the neck, but they're also assisting in respiration as well. Oftentimes this area can feel quite tense, and it can radiate down through the chest and into the arm as well. I'll chuck up a couple of examples of the trigger point mapping from Travell and Simmons, but I particularly like this one. I find that it's something that tends to get tight, especially in people who are athletes and perform a lot of the bodyweight movements that we talk about. And applying some light pressure using the fingers in a massage fashion can actually provide some relief, especially if the tightness is felt in this area as opposed to on the back of the neck. I would just add a note of warning to this one in terms of like, you kind of need to roughly know where these muscles are, because obviously we've got a lot of veins, arteries, nerves, and other things that are in this area, and we don't necessarily want to be jamming about on the wrong place. But it's certainly something that's worth exploring and seeing if it gives you some relief or some benefit. So that's basically it. 3 things to think about. Number 1, get strong. It does actually help with a lot of these issues, especially strengthening areas that are weak. It does help a lot with just reducing pain and feeling better in general. If you want to find out yourself on a more of an individual level where exactly you need to focus on them, maybe go see a physio and get an assessment and get some help to understand this. It's not particularly simple. As always though, this is just my opinion, the thing I wanted to share. If you have your own opinion or want to share something that maybe you find helpful, and then anyone else who's reading the comments can also give that a try, leave a comment in the comment section down below. If you just enjoyed this video, you can hit that thumbs up button and support the channel. Right next to it is that subscribe button if you want to join the Bodyweight Warrior tribe and don't miss out any more future videos. But that's basically been it for this week, guys. I'll catch you in the next episode. Have a strong week and peace.